Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Haunting Harmonies from the Isle of Wight. Holly Lancaster had always been drawn to the melancholic beauty of the Isle of Wight. As a struggling musician, she found solace in its quiet coastal towns and the gentle lapping of the sea against the cliffs. It was in one of these quaint villages, nestled between forgotten bookstores and dusty antique shops, that she stumbled upon a peculiar find. The shop was called Eldritch Echoes, a name that immediately piqued her curiosity. It was dimly lit, with shelves crammed with old vinyl records, vintage instruments, and cheap music yellowed with age. As Holly browsed through the collection, her fingers brushed against a record sleeve that seemed to pulse with an inexplicable energy. She pulled it out and examined it closely. The cover was a faded, sepia-toned photograph of a grand, ivy-covered manor. Below it, in elegant, flowing script, were the words, "Harmonies of the Abyss compositions by Elias Thornfield." Holly had never heard of Elias Thornfield, but something about the record called to her. She brought it to the counter, where the shop's proprietor, an elderly man with clouded eyes and a cryptic smile, regarded her with a knowing look. "Ah, you found old Elias, have you?" he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "That record's got quite the history. Some say it's cursed." Holly laughed nervously, thinking the man was merely trying to add a bit of theatrics to his sale. "How much?" she asked. "Take it," the man said, waving her off. "Consider it a gift, but be careful, my dear. Some things are best left forgotten." That evening, in her small cottage overlooking the sea, Holly placed the record on her turntable. As the needle touched the vinyl, a low, haunting melody filled the room. The music was unlike anything she had ever heard, eerie and beautiful, with an otherworldly quality that sent shivers down her spine. It felt as if the music were wrapping around her, drawing her into its dark embrace. As the first track ended, Holly felt a strange compulsion to learn more about Elias Thornfield. She scoured the internet and local archives but found very little information. Thornfield was a reclusive composer from the late 19th century, known for his hauntingly beautiful pieces that were said to drive listeners mad with sorrow. His death was shrouded in mystery, with rumors of occult practices and dark rituals surrounding his final days. Intrigued and increasingly obsessed, Holly decided to visit the manor depicted on the record's cover. After some investigation, she discovered it was located on the outskirts of a small village on the Isle of Wight, abandoned and left to decay for decades. The manor, Thornfield House, stood at the end of a long, winding road, its once grand facade now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. As Holly approached, she felt an oppressive atmosphere enveloping the place, as if the very air were charged with the weight of forgotten secrets. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of dust-covered rooms and shadowy corridors. In the grand hall she found an old piano, its keys yellowed with age. On the piano was a tattered journal. She opened it to find pages filled with Thornfield's meticulous handwriting, detailing his descent into madness and his attempts to communicate with spirits through his music. One entry caught her eye. June 13, 1897. The voices grow stronger with each composition. They whisper secrets of the beyond, of a world unseen. I am close to unlocking the door, but at what cost? The music is no longer mine, it belongs to them. As Holly read, she felt a presence in the room. The temperature dropped, and she could see her breath misting in the cold air. The piano began to play by itself, the same haunting melody from the record echoing through the manor. She turned to see a shadowy figure seated at the piano, its fingers dancing over the keys with unnatural speed and grace. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure turned, revealing hollow eyes that seemed to peer into her very soul. "You have heard my music," it said, its voice a chorus of anguished whispers. "You are part of the symphony now." Holly backed away, but the door slammed shut, trapping her inside. The music grew louder, more insistent, and she felt a pull towards the piano. She sat down, her hands moving to the keys as if guided by an invisible force. As she played, images flashed before her eyes: Thornfield's life, his obsession, the rituals he performed to channel the music of the dead. She saw him in his final moments, surrounded by candles and arcane symbols, his eyes wide with terror as he realized the true cost of his ambition. The spirits he had summoned were not content to remain as mere muses. They demanded more. They demanded souls. With the final, discordant chord, Holly was ripped from the vision. She found herself back in her cottage, the record still spinning on the turntable. But something was different. The room felt colder, darker. She could hear whispers at the edge of her hearing, voices calling her name. Over the following days, Holly's obsession with the music deepened. She played the record constantly, unable to resist its siren call. Her dreams were filled with visions of Thornfield and the spirits he had bound to his music. She began to compose her own pieces, dark and haunting melodies that seemed to flow from some otherworldly source. One night, as she played a particularly mournful tune, she felt a presence behind her. She turned to see Elias Thornfield standing there, his spectral form flickering like a candle in the wind. "It is time," he said, extending a hand. The symphony must be completed. Holly knew what he meant. She had become the next vessel, the next composer to continue the dark legacy. With a sense of dread and inevitability, she took his hand. The world around her dissolved into darkness, and she felt herself falling into an abyss of sorrow and despair. When she awoke, she was no longer in her cottage. She stood in the grand hall of Thornfield House, the piano before her, the journal open to a blank page. The spirits of the past surrounded her, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. Holly sat down at the piano, her fingers moving over the keys with a life of their own. As she played, the room filled with the haunting harmonies of the abyss, a symphony of sorrow and madness that would echo through the ages. And so the cycle continued. The music of Elias Thornfield lived on, claiming soul after soul, each composer adding their own tragic notes to the eternal melody. Holly was lost to the haunting harmonies, her spirit bound to the music, forever part of the dark legacy of the Isle of Wight. Years passed, and Holly's disappearance became just another unsolved mystery, whispered about by the villagers of the Isle of Wight. Thornfield House remained an eerie relic, a place of legends and ghost stories told round campfires. Yet the haunting harmonies played on, calling out to those sensitive enough to hear them. One such person was Jack Turner, a young, ambitious music historian from London. Jack had always been fascinated by obscure composers and forgotten melodies. He had heard rumors of Elias Thornfield and his mysterious compositions, but had dismissed them as mere folklore. However, his interest was piqued when he came across a reference to Holly Lancaster, a modern musician who had vanished without a trace after discovering Thornfield's record. Determined to uncover the truth, Jack travelled to the Isle of Wight, tracing Holly's steps to eldritch echoes. The shop seemed even more otherworldly than he had imagined, with its shadowy corners and peculiar artifacts. The elderly proprietor, now even frailer and more cryptic, greeted Jack with the same knowing smile he had given Holly. "You seek the music of the dead, don't you?" the old man rasped. Jack nodded, his curiosity overpowering his fear. "I want to understand what happened to Holly Lancaster and Elias Thornfield. What is the truth behind their music?" the proprietor sighed, his eyes clouding over as if recalling a distant memory. "The truth, young man, is not for the faint of heart. Elias Thornfield's music was a gateway, a bridge to the other side. He sought to commune with spirits, to capture their sorrow and madness in his compositions, but he did not realize the price until it was too late. Holly, like many before her, was ensnared by the music's dark power." He handed Jack a withered journal, its pages filled with Thornfield's fevered writings. "Take this. It will guide you to Thornfield House, but be warned, once you enter, there may be no turning back." Armed with the journal and a resolve to uncover the truth, Jack made his way to the decaying manor. The journey felt surreal, the air heavy with anticipation. As he approached Thornfield House, he was struck by its desolate beauty, the ivy-covered walls and broken windows whispering of forgotten grandeur. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of darkness and decay. Jack followed the journal's cryptic instructions, moving through rooms filled with dust-covered relics and echoes of the past. In the grand hall, he found the piano, its keys seemingly untouched for decades. The journal instructed him to play the first composition, Lament of the Lost. As Jack's fingers grazed the keys, a chilling melody filled the air, resonating with an unnatural intensity. The music seemed to come alive, wrapping around him like a spectral embrace. He felt a presence behind him and turned to see a shadowy figure, the ghost of Holly Lancaster. "Holly," he whispered, his voice trembling. Her eyes, filled with sorrow, met his. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice a soft, mournful echo. "The music, it binds us, it traps our souls in its endless melody." Jack felt a cold dread seep into his bones. "There must be a way to break the cycle, to free you and the others." Holly shook her head, tears glistening in her ghostly eyes. "The music cannot be undone, but perhaps it can be completed." The journal had hinted at a final composition, an unfinished symphony that Thornfield had never managed to complete. Jack knew what he had to do. With Holly's guidance, he began to play the haunting notes, each one resonating with the pain and sorrow of the trapped souls. As the final notes filled the air, the room grew colder, the shadows deepening. Jack could feel the spirits converging, their anguish palpable. But something was changing. The oppressive weight began to lift, the music transforming from a dirge of despair to a requiem of release. The shadows around the piano began to dissipate, and Holly's form grew brighter, more defined. She smiled at Jack, a look of profound gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You've given us peace." With those words, she faded, along with the other spirits, their presence replaced by a calm stillness. The manor, once a place of darkness, felt lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. Jack left Thornfield House, the haunting melodies still echoing in his mind, but now they were melodies of liberation, not despair. He returned to London, forever changed by his encounter with the dark legacy of the Isle of Wight. He wrote about his experience, sharing the story of Elias Thornfield and Holly Lancaster, ensuring that their music and their souls would never be forgotten. The record, now silent, remained in his possession, a reminder of the thin veil between this world and the next, and the haunting harmonies that had once bridged the two. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.